Okay, I'd like to speak to you briefly this morning. I was waiting for a round of applause on that briefly. Briefly today on this Father's Day about not our natural earthly fathers, which we of course all have one or have had one, or we wouldn't be here. But I want to talk about the Father that we all have in common, which is our Heavenly Father. And I'd like to begin reading in John's Gospel, chapter 17, beginning with verse 1. The 17th chapter of John's Gospel is a prayer given by Jesus for His disciples just before He went to the cross. And it's interesting that He does mention also not just the 12 disciples sitting around the Last Supper table with Him, but He mentions us as well in this prayer. He prays for you and me, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But beginning with the first verse in John 17, beginning with verse 1, these words spoke Jesus, and He lifted up His eyes to heaven, and He said, Father, the hour is come, glorify Thy Son, and Thy Son also may glorify Thee, as Thou hast given Him power over all flesh, that He should give eternal life to as many as Thou hast given Him. And this is life eternal, that they may know Thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom Thou hast sent. I have glorified Thee on the earth. I have finished the work which Thou gavest me to do. And now, O Father, glorify Thou me with Thine own self, with the glory which I had with Thee before the world was. And notice verse 6. I have manifested Thy name unto men, unto the men which Thou gavest me out of the world. Thine they were, and Thou gavest them to me, and they have kept Thy word. In verse 6 he says, I have manifested Thy name unto them. Let me read you that from the Amplified Translation. In verse 6 it says, I have manifested Your name, that is, I have revealed Your very self, Your real self, to the people whom You have given me out of the world. When Jesus said that He has manifested the name of God and revealed the name of God to those that were given to Him, I should point out to you that in the Old Testament, God was known primarily by two names. In the book of Genesis, He's called, in the Hebrew language, Elohim, which is the language concerning God as a creator, generally translated just God. And when you see the word Lord in the Old Testament, it's the Hebrew word Jehovah, or as a Hebrew transliteration that some people use, Yahweh. And that is the name of the Lord as a great warrior God, great mighty warrior, the strong mighty right arm who fought for the armies of Israel. He was known as Jehovah and Elohim, and to Abraham He revealed Himself as El Shaddai in Hebrew, which means the all-sufficient one. But when we come to the Gospels, Jesus said, I have manifested Thy name. And it's interesting to me that Jesus did not use any of those names. He did not refer to God and urge His disciples to address God by any of those names. He didn't call Him Jehovah. He didn't call Him Elohim. He didn't call Him El Shaddai. What Jesus called, the name that Jesus used was Father. And the name that Jesus revealed to His disciples and to us and encouraged us to use in addressing God was not Jehovah or Elohim or El Shaddai, but Father. Jesus, as the Son, has manifested and revealed the true nature of God, which is the Father. And He introduces those of us who are believers in Him to the Father. And it's a term of intimacy. It's not a term that we use of somebody that's off at a distance, but somebody that we can know. And He even said that here, that they may know You. This is life eternal. Notice in verse 20 in this same chapter, I think this is interesting because He not only is praying for those 12 disciples sitting around the table, but notice in verse 20, He brings you and I sitting here today, 2,000 years afterwards, He brings us into the prayer. Verse 20, Neither pray I for these alone, but for them also which shall believe on Me through their word. He says, I'm not just praying for these 12 disciples, but I'm praying for the people who will believe in Me, Jesus, through their word. And that includes all of us, because we believe in Jesus because of the words that were written down from those first 12 disciples, and Paul, who was not one of them, but also wrote about Jesus. And so now Jesus in this prayer is praying for you and I who are sitting here today, that they all may be one, even as Thou, Father, art in Me, and I in Thee, that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that Thou hast sent Me. And the glory which Thou gavest Me I have given them, that they may be one, even as we are one. I and them, Thou and Me, that they may be made perfect in one, that the world may know that Thou hast sent Me, and Thou hast loved them as Thou hast loved Me. Father, Notice that Jesus keeps addressing him as Father. Father, I will that they also, whom thou hast given me, be with me where I am, that they may behold my glory, which thou hast given me, for thou lovest me before the foundation of the world. O righteous Father, the world hath not known thee, but I have known thee, and these have known that thou hast sent me. And I have declared unto them thy name. Again, when he says, I have declared your name, he didn't use those Old Testament names. He used the name Father. Almost universally, when Jesus talks about God in heaven, he calls him Father. And even in the Lord's Prayer, when the disciples said, teach us to pray, he says, all right, here's how you pray. Say, our Father. You remember Jesus said that. First of all, in talking about this, I'd like to first make the point and underscore the fact that the nature of our relationship with God, and how is it that He's our Father. You know, a father is a person who has given birth to the children. The children are born of or begotten from the Father. Look at what it says here in the same Gospel of John, back in chapter 1. See, that relationship is very important, and it's important to understand that, because when a father gives birth to children, the children carry the nature and the characteristics of the father that gives them birth. And I wanted to point out to you what the nature of this relationship is, and bring to your attention that it's established by God. That the Father has established this relationship. You and I didn't make it. See, it wasn't like God was up in heaven, inaccessible, and we were climbing up trying to make ourselves good enough, and maybe we can make some kind of a relationship with God. It was God who came down and got us, and accepted us, and received us. And He established the relationship. And it's important to see it that way, because if you understand that God is the one who established the relationship, and all we did was put our faith. The only thing we can boast about doing was believing in Jesus. If you understand that He's the one that established the relationship, you can also understand then that if He established it, nothing we do breaks it. We don't break it by making a mistake or by failing. God is the one that established it, and it's by His power that the relationship is established and is maintained. Notice what it says in John's Gospel, chapter 1. Speaking of Jesus, let's take it up with verse 10. John chapter 1, verse 10. He was in the world, and the world was made by Him, and the world knew Him not. He came unto His own, and His own received Him not. Now when it says His own, He's talking about the old covenant people of God, which was the nation of Israel. Jesus came to the nation of Israel, to the generation that was alive when He came. And He came to them, and by and large, except for a small number, they basically rejected Him. He said He came unto His own, and His own did not receive Him. But in verse 12, it says, but as many as received Him. That means everybody who did receive Him. So it's talking now about you and I, who are Christians here sitting in church today, because of this fact we have received Him. You see what it means to receive someone when a person comes to the door of your house and knocks on the door. You look out through the window and you have a choice whether you open the door and let them in or not, right? And sometimes people come to the door and you don't let them in, and you might peek out there and say, I just think I'll play like I'm not here. I'll play possum. And sometimes it's those people who want you to call God by Jehovah. Maybe I shouldn't say it. Maybe you can cut that out of it. Anyway, sometimes it's people that have little magazines and books. You don't want to talk to them today, perhaps. But see, you decide. The point I'm making is you decide who comes into your house. But if it's somebody you see, you say, I want to let them in. You open the door and you have received them into your house. That's how it works. Jesus said in the book of Revelation, behold, I stand at the door and knock. He's standing at everybody's door and knocking. And those of us who are Christians today because we heard Him knock and we opened the door of our hearts, and He came in not to our house but to this house and to our lives. We opened the door and let Him come in. That's what it means to receive Him. It says, to as many as received Him. So what about those of us who have received Him? To them He gave the power. Now this word power, there's actually two Greek words that can be translated power in the New Testament. One of them means power, like force. The word is dunamis. There's another word which is translated power, which really doesn't mean force. It means authority or a right or a privilege. And that's the word used here. To those who received Him, He gave the right or the privilege to become the sons of God. Even to those who, notice this, who believe on His name. The only thing that we can say that we did is to believe in Him, to put our faith in Him. And those of us who receive Him by putting our faith in Him, it says He gives us a privilege. The privilege is we now can call ourselves the sons of God, or the offspring of God, or those who are born of God. Verse 13, He makes it specific and explicit what He means. Which were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, or of the will of man, but of God.